Greetings, students. This video is meant to help you to complete your notes over neurons and reflex arcs in the event that I am not at school on Friday. Or if I am and I decide that you're going to watch this video anyway because I made it. Hey, today your objective is to describe the three types of neurons and their functions in a reflex arc. In order to help you review what we've already talked about for reflexes, take a look back at yesterday's notes, and in your bell work for today, you're going to list that sequence of events that happens when you experience a reflex. Today's notes again focus on neurons and reflex arcs. This is under our Unit 10, Coordination and Response. We have three vocabulary terms for today, including reflex arc, motor neuron, sensory neuron, and relay neuron. We're going to start with information about neurons. There are three types of neurons: sensory, motor, and relay. All three types of neurons are highly specialized. That means that they have very specific structures that are designed to help them transmit information through impulses. This applies to their overall structure, their shape, as well as some special features that they have. We're going to start by looking at a sensory neuron. A sensory neuron is directly connected to a sense organ. On one end, it's connected to the sense organ. This could be your eye. It could be connected to rods or cones in your retina. It could be connected to your nose in your olfactory receptors that are picking up chemicals in the air. That end collects information about incoming stimuli, which is then carried throughout the length of the neuron to the opposite end, where it is going to be connected to the central nervous system. You can see that the shape of a sensory neuron has a very long, what's called a dendron, and then a very short axon. Information always travels from the dendron towards the axon. This applies to all types of neurons. You can also see another feature surrounding the dendrons and axons in this sensory neuron, and those are called the myelin sheaths. We're going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute. The second type of neuron that we are talking about is called a motor neuron. Motor neurons transmit impulses from the central nervous system out to effector organs, like the muscles and glands. If you remember from yesterday's notes, the term effector applies to anything that has an effect on your surroundings and helps you with your responses. The motor neuron, you can see, has a different shape from the sensory neuron. On one end, you have the cell body. That's where you're going to find the nucleus of the cell, and the dendrons or dendrites are smaller and connected directly to the cell, but then it has a very long axon. It still carries information in the direction of dendron towards the axon. In this case, the axon is connected to the effector, either a muscle or gland. In between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons, you'll find relay neurons. Relay neurons are very short, and their only job is to relay information. They take in and redirect information, and we find them primarily in the central nervous system. This could be in your spinal cord or in your brain. They also have dendrons and axons, and again, direction of information is always from the dendron towards the axon. Some specific information about the structure and function of our neurons is as follows. Sensory neurons, their dendrons and motor neuron axons can be very, very long. They can be over a meter long. If you think about it, the motor neuron that's connected to the muscle in your big toe has to connect from your spinal cord at the base of your spine all the way down your leg to the muscle in your toe. So it can be very, very long. Same thing for your sensory neurons. Okay, you have to get information about your big toe all the way up to your spinal cord, in which case the dendrons of the sensory neuron can be very long as well. Dendrons always carry impulses towards the cell body, and axons carry it away. To help you remember, think axon away. AA. Just like arteries carry blood away from the heart, axons carry impulses away from the cell body. I mentioned earlier the myelin sheaths. Myelin sheaths are little cells that surround the dendrons or axons of your neurons, and they act like insulation. You can think like the plastic insulation, the plastic coating around charging cables and cords and things like that. It's there to keep the neuron from getting its wires crossed with other neurons that are close by, and protects that electrical impulse as it travels through the nerve. Okay, so again, it's like the coating on an electrical wire. Another interesting thing about neurons is that they never actually touch each other. So unlike your electrical cords, which you have to plug in, where they physically touch their energy source, the power source in the wall, our neurons don't actually touch each other. They have a little gap in between called a synapse. So again, a synapse is simply a gap between the two neurons. When the electrical impulse reaches the gap, or synapse, it causes the end of the axon to release a chemical transmitter. The chemical transmitter is something, you may also see the term neurotransmitter, like in the picture at the bottom of this page. What it does is it's just a chemical, and when the impulse reaches the end of the axon, it opens up a little pocket of neurotransmitters, and they diffuse across the synapse, across the gap, and when they are received by the dendron on the other side, then they're going to trigger an impulse or an electrical signal to pass into the next neuron. Chemical transmitters are only produced on the axon side of the synapse. This is meant to help prevent messages from going backwards. Okay? It does not help you to send information back to your sensory neurons. They don't do anything. They are not connected to muscles or glands. So sending information back down a sensory neuron has no purpose. Okay? Sensory neurons are only meant to send information towards the central nervous system. Okay, so we want to maintain a one-way flow of impulses. Okay, one of the issues that this causes is that there are certain drugs that work by interrupting the synapses, like alcohol. Alcohol slows down the reception of those neurotransmitters, which causes you to react more slowly. Now, we're going to take this information and we're going to apply it back to reflexes. Again, reminder from yesterday, reflexes or reflex actions are automatic, meaning you don't have to think about them. They are involuntary, and they are very quick. Most of them are also protective. They are a response to danger, such as coughing when something goes down the wrong way or down the trachea, blinking when dirt gets in your eye, releasing something that's very hot, like a burning hot cookie. Okay, all of those things are protective. Okay, your reflexes are so important that part of a typical physical from a doctor includes gathering information about your nervous system by checking your reflexes. Okay, the doctor will take one of those little rubber hammers and they will tap your knee and see that you are responding quickly, okay, that you're kicking after they tap your knee. That's your reaction time. Okay, we're not going to do that part. If you take a look at the picture in the bottom corner, this is showing you some other reflexes that you may not know that you had. When babies are born, for the first 3 to 6 months of their life, they have a grip reflex. Anything that goes near their hand, they will grab onto, whether they want to or not. It's a reflex. They're not thinking about it. They simply grab on. That was important, especially back in our tree wandering days. Babies needed to have the ability to hold on to mom while she was moving around. And so this was a reflex. They didn't have to learn it. It was something that they did automatically. Hey, continuing on with our reflexes and reflex arc and applying what we just learned about our nerves, we're going to put that into a physical system. Okay, we already know that when we touch something that causes pain, we're going to move away from it without thinking about it. The stimulus is detected by the pain receptors in our skin. A sensory neuron is going to connect those pain receptors to your spinal cord. So the information comes into the pain receptors. The pain receptors pass that information on to the sensory neuron. The sensory neuron is what physically connects those receptors to your spinal cords. They're going to carry the impulse. Once it reaches the spinal cord, inside the spinal cord, it's going to connect to a relay neuron. So that information is going to pass across the synapse into the relay neuron. The relay neuron is going to relay that information along to a motor neuron. Okay, so the impulse is passed through another synapse into the motor neuron, and the motor neuron is going to get information, or an impulse, that is going to instruct the muscles that it's connected to, the effectors, and it's going to tell them what they're going to do, the response. That's going to be to move your hand away from the danger. Okay? The impulse will also be passed along the spinal cord up to your brain, where eventually you're going to realize, ouch, that's hot. Again, you may not realize it until after you've moved your hand away from the object, after your response. This is protective because the shorter amount of time that you're touching something that is hurting you, the less you're going to get hurt. Here we have a diagram that shows the reflex arc in action. Step 1, you can see here, is the arrival of the stimulus and activation of the receptor. The stimulus in this case is a tack. You put your hand down on a tack. Step 2, the tack is going to trigger the receptor, which is going to send that information along to a sensory neuron. The sensory neuron is going to carry that impulse all the way up to your spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, you can see you have a relay neuron. The relay neuron is going to quickly send information or impulses back out to the motor neuron. The motor neuron is going to carry that information all the way out to your effectors. In this case, the effector is a muscle in your arm, which is going to then contract and pull your hand away from the stimulus. That is the response. If you look back at step 3, at the relay neuron located inside the spinal cord, you can see that it also passed the information along to the brain. That is going to reach your brain about the same time that the response gets to the effector. That's why, again, your hand is already safely removed from the tack around the same time that you realize that there was a tack. After you finish today's notes, you're going to complete, that's not a ticket to leave, sorry, correction to this slide. You're going to take the exit quiz, then you're going to work on your questions. Your summary activity is the separate page called Reflex Arc in Action. If you finish that one, then you'll work on your vocabulary log and your cover page. The end.